Simultaneous equations from easy to hard difficulty. So at the easy level, we are going to learn to solve simultaneous equations by adding the equations together. And now if that doesn't make any sense to you, just watch along and see what I do. So we've got the x's and y's and the equal signs lined up, and now we're going to add together the x's, so 2x plus 1x, so 2 plus 1 is 3, so that gives us 3x, and then minus 1y plus 1y. Well, minus 1 plus 1 is 0, so we're going to put plus 0y, and we know that 0y is just 0, so I'll put that in brackets because that's going to disappear. And 1 plus 5 is 6, so because our 0y disappears, I can write that as 3x equals 6. And now you'll notice we have an equation with just one of the letters in, and you should know how to solve this one. We can just divide by 3 to find that x equals 2. And of course, remembering to solve simultaneous equations, we need to find values for both x and y. So to find a value for y, we can substitute our value for x into one of the original equations. So putting in 2 for x plus y equals 5, and you should hopefully know how to solve this equation as well. We can just take away 2 from both sides, and y equals 3. So as you can see, we've got a value for x and a value for y, so we know we've solved it. To check if you're correct, you can substitute your x and y values into one of the original equations, so the top one, and make sure it comes out as equal to 1. So we've got 2 times 2 minus 3, and 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 minus 3 is 1. That's 1, so we know we're definitely correct. We've definitely got all the marks. Before we move on, if you want to get really, really good at this skill, have a go at practicing 1 or 2 or all 3 of those. If you're stuck on any of them or you want to know the answers, then just leave a comment and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Going down to the medium level, we are going to add in something extra. We are going to add in timesing one of the equations. So you'll notice if we go straight to adding them, we get 3 plus 5 is 8x, and 1 plus 2 is 3y. So we don't get an equation with just one letter. So what we're going to have to do is we have to make one of the letters, we have to have the same number of one of the letters. So if we go back to our easy equation, you'll notice we had 1y. In ignoring the negatives and positives, we had 1y in both of those equations. And just in our easy examples, we have 5y, 5y, just as an example. But here we have 3x, 5x, 1y, 2y. So we don't have the same number of either letter. So we've got to times one of the equations to get the same number of a letter. So I'm going to try timesing this equation by 2. And if I times each term in the equation by 2 to not change the equation, so we get 6x, because 3 times 2 is 6, and then 1 times 2 is going to give us plus 2y, and 13 times 2 is going to be 26. And then if we leave our second equation the same, we get 5x plus 2y equals 21, and you'll notice we have 2y in both the equations. And I'm going to add in a second thing at medium level, is that sometimes we're going to need to subtract the equations rather than add them. So you'll notice if we add these equations, you'll get 11x and 2 plus 2 is 4y, and that still doesn't give us an equation with one letter in. Whereas if we subtract them, we get 6 minus 5 is 1x, 2 minus 2 is 0y, so I'll put that in brackets because that's going to disappear, and 26 minus 21 is 5. So you can kind of tell if you need to add or subtract by looking at the same number. For our easy example, minus 1 plus 1 gives us 0, so we're going to add. For this one, 2 minus 2 is 0, so we're going to subtract because 2 plus 2 gives us 4, so that wouldn't work. So back to the example, if we get rid of the 0y, we don't actually have to do any solving, we're just told that x equals 5. But now can you remember, how do we find y? Well, we have to substitute in our x value to one of the original equations. Let's take this one. So I'll put in 5 for x plus y equals 13. So that's going to be 15 plus y equals 13. And if we take off 15 from both sides, we get y equals minus 2. So we've got our solution for x, now solution for y. So we've solved them. Let's check in the other equation just to make sure we've got all of the marks and we haven't made any silly mistakes. It's very easy to make silly mistakes in these kinds of questions. So 5 times 5 is 25, 2 times minus 2 is going to be minus 4, so 25 minus 4 is 21, which is definitely correct, so we know we've got all the marks. Now this is again definitely a skill worth practicing, so if you want to get really good at these, have a go at these three. Leave a comment if you're stuck or you want the answers or anything. And finally, hard difficulty, what you'll get in the exam most likely, is where we're going to have to times both equations, because there's no simple trick where we times one equation by 2 and we get the same letter. If you're really good at adding fractions and timesing the fractions to get the same denominator to add them, then you should be totally fine with this because it's the same sort of skill. So we either want the same number of x's or the same number of y's. So we need to times both equations by something different to get there. So let's look at the x's because I think they're slightly easier. 6 and 4. What can we times 6 and, well, what can we times the equations by to get the same number, or which number shall we aim for? So a number in both of their times tables is 12. So that's going to be the easiest number to aim for. So if we times this equation by 2, we get 12x, minus 7 times 2 is minus 14y, 25 times 2 is 50, and then if we times this equation by 3, then 4 times 3 is 12, so we've got the same number of x's, but we're not done yet. 3 times 3 is positive 9y, and 9 times 3 equals 27. Now, are we going to add or subtract these equations? That's always the question you've got to ask yourself when you've got the same number of x's or y's. We aren't going to add them because 12 plus 12 is 24. It's 12 minus 12 that gives us 0. So you're looking to get 0. So 12 minus 12 gives us 0x. Put that in brackets because that's going to disappear. Minus 14 minus 9 is going to be minus 23y. And then 50 minus 27 gives us 23. Hopefully you should be able to see what y is without solving it, but we can just divide both sides by minus 23, and we get y equals minus 1. So we found our value for y. How do we find the value for x now? We're going to have to sub it in to one of the equations. Let's take this equation. So 4x plus 3, lots of minus 1 equals 9. That gives us 4x. 3 times minus 1 is minus 3 equals 9. And now this is a two-step equation which hopefully you're really good at solving. We will add 3 to both sides and get 4x equals 12, and then hopefully you can see that if we divide both sides by 4, we get x equals 3. So we've got our solution. Now we should just probably check to make sure we haven't made any mistakes by subbing in x and y to the other equation. So 6 times 3 is 18, minus 7 times minus 1 is positive 7. That gives us 25. We've got 25 here, so we know we're correct. We know we've got all the marks, and that's about as hard as these kinds of questions will get. So definitely worth practicing these. Just make sure you've got your x's and y's lined up together. Again, if you get stuck, go into the comments. If you want to get really, really good at this skill, come back in a week, because most likely you'll have forgotten this in a week or forgotten a lot of it. So come back in a week, refresh yourself, and that will give you a really good grounding when you come into the exam.